think I can do this today. My brother Adam, he was amazing. He was really smart. He was really funny. He was a farmer in Iowa. He was really innovative, tried a lot of new things, was just launching an irrigation business, had the sign that was ready to go up. Never made it that far. It was August 22nd around supper time, about 6 p.m. The woman he was going to marry, Lisa, was about 3 miles away from him at the house that they shared. She was making him some steak for supper. He went to a farm site about 3 miles away from that to probably do a couple things, but one of the things was to weld a leak shut on a grain bin. Google it if you're not aware of what they are, but you can probably understand what a grain bin just by the words. He climbed up on a gorgeous August evening, and we don't know what happened, but he fell. Lisa called my brother, my youngest brother, Derek, concerned about where Adam was. So Derek knew what Adam was doing and drove to the site. I'm mad. I'm mad at I don't know who. The universe, God, either way it doesn't make sense, but I'm very angry. I'm very angry that my brother and the rest of what you're about to hear, that my brother had to find him. It's one thing to lose a family member in a tragic accident. I've discovered it's another to have fellow family members be the first on the scene. So my youngest brother, Derek, pulls up into that place, and I've never asked Derek for his trauma narrative. He's offered it, but I wasn't strong enough at the time. Now that I've seen what trauma narrative is for me, with all of you listening, I hope to offer that to Derek someday, to be someone who listens. All I know is Derek saw Adam, ran up to him, started CPR, I do remember Derek told me he already knew that Adam was gone. My dad, besides being a farmer, serves on the board for a grain elevator in the area, was at a meeting. Derek told him that he needed to come now. I can't remember if Derek told him that we needed an ambulance. Dad drove out to the site, probably 100 miles an hour. And he and my brother and Lisa, he and my youngest brother Derek and Lisa took turns screaming in shock. My dad says he remembers Lisa just screaming and screaming and screaming and doing compressions even though they knew it was too late. So there's the story of how my brother died. Thanks for the incredible outpouring support after the story of the death of my brother. It's not that I didn't expect it. It was just more than I expected. Thank you so much. For those of you who also spoke to losing someone that you love, I am so sorry. For those of you who had already been following me, you know that the death of my brother was like part of the continuation of the story that I've been telling. For those who are new, you're about to hear kind of a sordid kind of side story that goes along with it of me being in the depths of a substance abuse disorder at the same time. Many of you in the comments spoke of the screams yourself at losing someone, or hearing the screams of your mother or your sister or someone like that who had lost a loved one. And that's partly why I weirdly feel like the depths of my substance abuse happened. There's just something weird with the timing where I don't know how I would have handled those screams based on where I was at in life. I weirdly feel like the timing of those two events were not simple coincidence. And again, for those who are new followers, the coinciding of me going to check into a substance abuse center for the first time in my life, coinciding within 24 hours, my younger brother dying. Anyway, if you go back a couple posts, I talk about how I did eventually hear the news and got home to Iowa, went in the house, My friend Lindsay took away my substances, said that she would help me detox so I didn't have to go cold turkey. And I think that afternoon is when my remaining siblings and I and my parents went to the funeral home to view Adam for the first time. It was able to be an open casket. He looked different, but he also looked like Adam. He looked like Adam as much as you can in that situation. Goes without saying, but that's an extremely surreal experience. Probably wasn't healthy to do, but I remember just running my hands all over his torso, feeling the broken parts that were hidden so nicely underneath the padding in the shirt, examining his head for the marks. Thanks again for all the love and support that continues. This is an uncharacteristic Saturday post. Again, my family didn't really press me for where I had been or the fact that I was about to check into a substance abuse center. I got it a bit from relatives, and I think I just ignored them. I don't remember feeling like I needed to explain myself to anyone. My brother's dead. I'm not going to talk about that right now, about where I was. That Saturday night, August 24th, was when I decided that I fully needed to punish myself, again stated in another video, for what I'm not technically certain at this time, but I just I felt the need to pay for what I had done. So I made the decision to go cold turkey off my substance abuse addiction. Being a pharmacist and my friend Lindsay being a dentist, we both knew that wasn't a good idea, but that's the way that I was going to do it. And Lindsay was next to me if I needed. The worst part I remember was the intense muscle contractions. They weren't so bad in the day, but at night, the muscle contractions of withdrawal were painful, horrible, kept the minute I'd actually start to fall asleep because for those, it sounds like a lot who are following me have dealt with this type of grief. The insomnia is horrible, lasts for months, but anyway, the insomnia hit. And so when I would possibly start to fall asleep, I'd get muscle contractions from the withdrawal. And I felt like I deserved it. I felt like I was paying. During this time, Matt was very attentive and loving. He was really great in those first couple days. I loved that my parents were being supported by so many people from their church, but when a whole bunch of people are standing around and have nothing to talk about, small talk starts. And I hated that. I don't want to hear about the Morton building that you're building, that's under construction at your farm. I don't give a shit. Like, my brother's dead. Like, the small talk, I remember, just drove me insane. Another thing that drove me insane was people saying, my thoughts are with you at this difficult time. I used to say those things. And I never say that anymore. It's always at the end of like newspaper articles too. At this difficult time, you mean like the rest of my life? Because my brother's gonna be dead for the rest of my life and I'm in shock right now. So save your thoughts for later when I'm actually outside the shock, because prayers are with you at this difficult time. Just, I'd rather die than go through what I'm going through right now. So it's Sunday, August 25th of 2013. Normally on a Sunday, my family would go to church, but we didn't, because that day at the church that my parents go to, there was going to be a wedding. It's kind of a long story. It's a different type of church. The wedding of the church people happens during like the normal church day. Not that that's weird, but just for those people who are like, what do you mean you're not going to church because there's a wedding? Yeah. Who goes to a wedding when your brother's dead? So anyway, we stayed home. I can't remember seeing or being around Derek, but it was, goes without saying probably, but it's horrible being around your parents when their son is dead. They're just these walking shells, and you feel like a shell too. And then your dad tries to tell you details, and you're like, Dad, I can't do it. I can't. You can't hear it. And you know your dad needs to talk about it, but you just can't do it. Enter another night of pretty rough withdrawal with Lindsay at my side, making sure I was okay. And of course, the insomnia that comes with grief. On Monday, August 26th was the visitation. My friend had to drive to Kmart about 20 miles-ish away and get me some clothes because all I'd packed was like yoga gear when I was rushing to get out the door and go home. This is an event where you don't cry because you're in shock, while thousands of people do cry as they come through the line and tell you how much they love your brother. You kind of just constantly hope that you're dreaming. It's like weird. You're hugging people who are shaking and bawling in your arms, and you are reassuring them, it'll be okay, because you're in shock. So you can't even feel it. You're just confused. If you're a follower, you know I like music, very much so. To the Colin Ray song, If You Get There Before I Do, I had changed the lyrics to be about my brother. My entire family, like relatives, are musical. I'm sure that's where I get it. And we gathered around Adam's casket, and in addition to other songs that we sang that song with the lyrics that I had wrote. I also spent a lot more time just standing by him when there weren't, the line was huge, so it must have been either at the beginning or the end when there weren't people around anymore. Just, I found like a pebble in his scalp that I kind of picked away. Felt his body. Monday night after my brother's visitation, I sat my family down. I can't remember if I included my husband Matt or my friend Lindsay, but I definitely talked to my dad, my mom, my sister, and my remaining brother about my plan, my hope. I had in my mind that I had such a loving, respectful relationship with my brother Adam that I had this feeling that if I was to make a promise to him that I would never abuse a substance ever again, I firmly believed that I could do it. So I had this idea that I was going to take everything that I had in my possession and bury it in his casket with him, literally and figuratively burying my addiction with my brother and a promise to him. But I wanted my family to be okay with that. I wouldn't want them to find out later, or I don't know, just even unknowingly, if they would have hated the idea that I was putting pills in my brother's casket. So I told them essentially what I just said to you, and they all gave their blessing for me to bury it with Adam. The next day, Tuesday, was the funeral. We arrived early at the church, and I had found something to put all of the pills in, slightly morbidly humorous. I should have wrapped it all in Kleenex or something, because when I tucked the box that I had found to put in his casket, it shifted or something, and all of a sudden you could just hear this clatter of all the pills. So again, really morbidly, horribly humorous. But to be clear, to anyone looking in, they wouldn't have seen it. They would have just seen a decorative box. Enter another event where you can't even cry. You're just numb. This is not happening. This is not happening to my 28-year-old brother, who is in peak physical condition and has such an amazing life ahead of him. I sat by my younger brother Derek in the service, and I remember leaning over to him and saying, is this happening, or this can't be happening? As Lisa, the woman Adam was going to marry, walked up to get her final view, she walked up with her parents on either side of her. And for good reason, because as she stood there sobbing, her knees buckled, and they both had to hold her on both sides to support her. I also remember his best friends just absolutely sobbing as they looked at him. For those who check on me, thank you. You're so sweet. Yeah, I'm doing well. There were four of these, one at each corner of Adam's casket. It's a beautiful thing, but you kind of don't want it because of what it symbolizes. My mother-in-law and my father-in-law came to Adam's funeral. Instead of sitting with my own family, I can't remember why, I sat with Matt and his parents. His mom was gushing to me about how friendly and welcoming everyone in my parents' church in our small hometown were. I could totally be taking this the wrong way, but now that I know what I do about her, it's caused me to rethink so many interactions with my mother-in-law in my life. And this is one of those times. Because the way that she was like cheerfully talking about how happy people seemed to see her and, you know, how thankful and wonderful it was that people thought that she was attending this event. I mean, I would assume you would. My brother died of a sudden death. I've now learned that that's kind of classic narc behavior. To be like, oh, so many people are celebrating me that I'm here. Another thing I can remember what seat I was sitting in the church cafeteria lunchroom, is she was just very cheerful. Asking me about work, I don't know. She was just making like normal conversation. At the time, I remember even thinking it was extremely inappropriate. But I just thought she was trying to distract me from a very obvious event that I can't be distracted from. But again, now it kind of seems like she completely lacked empathy and was at an event where she was having a great time. If you started following or came to me because of my grief story and suddenly I sound like a monster for what I'm saying about my mother-in-law, you may have to catch up on my story. I actually talked to my husband last night, so I think about what I'm going to say previous to me posting these. And I told my husband about kind of my memories of that funeral. And he said he remembers just wanting to like scream to his mom, shut up, with all of her just cheerful, small chit chat at my brother's funeral. I don't remember saying bye to them. I'm assuming they left after. I just only remember that small snippet of them being there. Either that day, that Tuesday, or the following day, my husband returned to Mankato, Minnesota because the school year was starting and he needed to be teaching the new position that he'd gotten for the fall school year. Lindsay also had to take off and go back to where she was living. So my brother's funeral ended and people went back to their normal lives. Everyone, that is, except us. And again, for those of you, for the thousands of comments on my grief story, I still haven't had a chance to go through and just like and lend my support and listening ear to your comments, but so many of you know what I'm talking about. Everyone does the visitation, the funeral, they send the card, and then they go back to normal. And you just wish you could crawl in the same hole that your loved one is in. I was working for a major pharmacy retail, corporation at the time. I was managing their pharmacy in Mankato. I called them and they knew about it, probably from technicians that had alerted them. Told me that the bereavement policy was 3 days. And I get that. That's the bereavement policy where I currently work. That just kind of probably is a normal bereavement policy. And again, I understand that corporations have to do that. They can't give you all the time you need because that'd be like the rest of your life. But 3 days, I almost laughed. Again, I understood, but it was just like, you think I'm gonna come back to work in 3 days? They were extremely understanding when I kind of explained that I understand the bereavement policy, but I'm not coming back to work. I'll resign from the pharmacy before I can come back to work. They were like, no, we understand. We've got you. I can't say enough good things about this corporation that I was working for because they followed normal policy. They weren't mean to me. They let me take all the time that I needed. Unpaid, but again, that's understandable. They said, just tell us when you can come back. I stayed at my family's house in Iowa only for 1 or 2 max more days. I just couldn't do it It was just too painful to be there. I wanted to go into denial. I wanted to leave. Because if I left, I could just pretend that life was what it always was. Whereas my family had generally stayed in the same 10-mile vicinity in Iowa, I had left to go to college, left to move to Florida to go to pharmacy school, etc. And so I knew that I could totally denial my way into pretending like things were like they always were. If I just leave, I can just pretend things are what they always are. It's not like I saw my brother every single day. We didn't text every single day, so I can just pretend that everything's normal. I know that's very unhealthy, but it seems like the easiest thing at the time. So a loving aunt and her friend drove me back to Mankato. Matt wasn't there when I got back because he was doing his teacher onboarding workshop days. But that night when he returned, I told him that I wanted to enter substance abuse rehab officially, and was going to be leaving the next day to do so. Wrapping up here, sorry I'm posting less. I'm not sorry. Just moving and organizing is taking. So I did a short-term stay. I almost felt like I didn't need it because my promise to my brother and the cascade of events seemed so life-changing that I truly didn't think that I would relapse, but I didn't want to be naive, and you never know. I have never relapsed. Other than marijuana, which I've talked about in some past posts, I have been free of all substances since then, other than like 3 alcoholic beverages in a year. I have nothing against alcohol. I'm not into it. I even had 2 occasions where a benzo would have been given to me. A couple years after Adam died, there was a stressful time at work, and a friend offered me a Xanax just, to take the edge off. And I was tempted for about a millisecond, and very quickly remembered my promise to my brother and turned it down. The second time was I had a minor procedure done a couple years ago, and as part of the procedure I was prescribed Ativan, and I just chose not to fill it. Even though, I told myself, well, this is for a procedure, it's being prescribed. I don't even want to go there. Shortly after I got out of rehab, Matt and I met up with my mother-in-law and father-in-law for a dinner. My father-in-law asked me how I was doing, and I said, as far as intensely missing my brother, pretty horrible. He clapped me on the back and said, "Life goes on, Bethy." And grudge or not, I've never forgotten that statement. To the point that when my father-in-law died in September of 2019, and his daughters were talking about how hard it was to move on and how they couldn't, be engaged or care about anything else going on in their lives, I wanted to clap him on the back and be like, life goes on. I mean, that's what your dad told me once. I didn't do that because who would say life goes on to someone who's grieving? Years later, aka recently, my husband has told me that there were several times that his family members told him that I was dragging it out too long, that my family was dragging our grief out too long, that we were just being really negative about it. In future posts, as I get into the years, as I'm catching the story up to where the narc abuse was, you'll hear some of those occasions where I didn't know that my in-laws had said it, but they certainly conveyed it to me during other actions. 5 weeks after my brother's death, I returned to work. So I returned to work at a retail pharmacy. I made it 3 days and I told them I was resigning. 2 seemingly minor events broke the proverbial camel's back. The first was I had a customer complain about the 15-minute wait time and demand to speak to the manager, who was me. And then I had someone ream one of my technicians about a copay. I didn't lose it on either of these customers, but I felt extremely close to it. To save my own career and to save the reputation of the pharmacy I was working for, I thought it was best for all parties for me to resign. Or I gave my 2-week notice. I don't know what to call it. Essentially, though, I quit And I still gave him 2 weeks. And if that wasn't clear why, it was just like, you want to complain about a wait time and a copay? Those are annoying enough. As someone who works in a pharmacy, give your pharmacist and your techs a break. So it's annoying enough to have those things complained about. We don't have much control over either of those things. But having just lost my brother, it kind of was that feeling of, I don't give a shit about your wait time or your copay. Get the fuck out of my pharmacy. My brother's dead. I don't care about anything. So again, I figured that me quitting was better for everyone. And welcome to another aspect of life that I didn't know was possible until my brother died, was the idea of not having a job, which once upon a time would have terrified me. And at this point, it just kind of felt like I'll live in my parents' basement penniless because I cannot function right now. And it's not like you're thinking about the person that you miss 100% of the time. It's just the fact that you can't sleep and your brain is in such a fog. Functioning is just so difficult. I felt really bad that this retail pharmacy had, been very understanding of the time I needed off, only to have me resign 3 days within returning. I apologized profusely and they were sweet and understanding about it. I found, though, that once my job was over, I also couldn't stand being alone in the Mankato rental during the days that Matt was at school. A couple months later, I ended up coming across a contract position with an insurance company, a pharmacy benefits manager to be technical. This is a job that I'm not the type of person to take a chance on a contract for potential higher position, but again, kind of the plight of losing a brother, I really don't care what happens. Whereas Matt had been extremely loving and attentive in the few days after Adam's death, he kind of went back to being his normal, emotionally absent self pretty quickly. I've debated telling this part because my family doesn't know this. Very, very few people know this. 3. 5? Not 5. 3. Matt and I did separate in December of 2013. I moved out of the Mankato rental and up more close to Minneapolis. But because I was completely trauma bonded to him, didn't know those terms at the time, we continued to hang out every weekend. I didn't go back to Mankato, but he would come up to Minneapolis. I almost got away. And then in March of 2014, I discovered that I was pregnant. So we stayed together. And in June, we bought a house together and moved back in together. The story can go a lot of different ways here. I'll just go with what feels knee-jerk. Because I have body dysmorphia, I absolutely hated being pregnant. Or I maybe shouldn't lump everyone with body dysmorphia into that. Maybe some people with body dysmorphia have no problem being pregnant. I had huge problems with being pregnant. In addition, things were not normal on scans with my child, which added obviously a whole lot of additional stress to the pregnancy. Regular scans continued to not show improvement in the 21-week scan showed 4 markers for Down syndrome. We continued to do scans all the way up until 38 weeks, and by 36 or 38 weeks, we had 5 markers for Down, and we're planning for our child with Down syndrome. Bringing my in-laws into the story a little bit, I remember going on one of those lovely enmeshed obligated family vacations with them at the rental when I was 7 months pregnant, the rental that we all, of course, stay in. Middle sister-in-law in Washington, of course, didn't come. Oldest sister-in-law and her family had the entire upstairs loft area. mother-in-law and father-in-law had the guests. And Matt and I, me 7 months pregnant, were on the couch.